This is a long story, so bear with me. Growing up as a kid, before I became known a lot for fighting, I was bullied a lot. And a lot of the times I wasn't raised by my mom. I was raised by my aunts and uncles and cousins. So I moved around a lot of different houses, and that plays a big part in the story. So the story begins with me living with aunt number one. And around this time, it was the winter time, Charlotte, North Carolina. The kids not used to getting a lot of snow. So we're at the bus stop waiting for our bus, and the kids began to engage in a snowball fight. Side note, this was in the 6th grade, so I was around 11 or 12 for reference. I'm not really engaging with the kids. Like I said, I was bullied a lot, so I really didn't get along with them. I'm standing off to the side, and all of a sudden, they begin to turn their snowball fight against me. So as they're throwing snowballs at me, I began to run down this long, steep hill. And once I made it to the bottom of the hill, out of nowhere, 3 large-ass dogs just started chasing me out of nowhere. So now here I am trying to run up the hill with 3 big-ass dogs chasing behind me and snow that I'm not used to. And the kids that were throwing the snowballs at me, they're running, hiding for cover, waiting for the bus to come, and I'm by myself. So just when I was starting to lose breath and get halfway up the top of the hill, out of nowhere, I see something out the corner of my left eye, and simultaneously me and all of the dogs stopped, and we all looked to the left, and there was a little girl standing behind one of the houses, and she went shh, and out of nowhere the dogs just take off running. So at this point, the bus is already here, and apparently the bus driver had been sitting there waiting for me to get on the bus after staring at the little girl. And when I get on the bus, she asked me what are you staring at? And I was like, there's a little girl behind the house, and she helped get the dogs off of me. Now on the bus, I'm starting to process what just happened, and the little girl, and who the hell was she? Now on the bus, I'm processing what just happened. And one thing that stuck out in my mind was how I noticed that when I saw the little girl, she didn't have any shoes on. She was barefoot. She had on a long white dress, shoulder length brown hair, and something about her skin was pale, really pale. Not thinking much of it. I ain't tell nobody. I'm a kid. I went by my business. Later in that week, my sister comes to spend the night with me at my aunt's house. And how my aunt's house is set up, there's the living room, and then there's a hallway that leads to the bathroom. And at nighttime, that hallway gets really, really dark, you can't see down it. So me and my sister, we were laying on the couch. I was on one couch, she was on another. And out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, she jumps on me and just starts wailing and screaming. And so my aunt come in and she's like, what's wrong with you? And my sister was like, I could have sworn I just saw something coming down the hallway. Side note, my sister at the time was definitely afraid of leprechauns. So as a kid, she described it as leprechaun coming down the hallway. So fast forward, I'm now in the 7th grade. I'm living with aunt number 2. So aunt number 2, God bless her, will always keep a lot of kids in the home. She was always taking in me, my other cousins, other kids that were less fortunate. And we will all be raised in this house with my aunt and my uncle. So one night, me and all of the other kids of the house, we decided that we wanted to sleep downstairs in the living room on the floor. And how it was that her living room was in the middle, kitchen was off to the left, and then to the right was upstairs, rest of the bedrooms. So this is 3 o'clock in the morning, and me and my cousins are dead cold sleep, and out of nowhere, I feel on my shoulder. It wasn't a hard tap, but it was a tap that got my attention. So thinking it was one of my cousins, I look up and I see this little girl standing over me, and something about her, her aura was glowing. And mind you, we're in a pitch dark house, but I can see her and like everything that's like in her circumference like illuminated. So after making eye contact with the girl, she leans over, looks me in my eyes, and says, "Are you ready to go yet?" I was so scared. I didn't scream. I didn't holler. I just like took the cover and like just hurried up and put it over my head. And that's how I slept for the rest of the night. Like clockwork for years, no matter what house I went to, no matter what family member I was staying with, this girl, whether it be like months, whether it be years down the line, she would randomly pop up, 3-tap me, and lean over in my face and ask me, was I ready to go? The final time I physically saw her, I was maybe in like the 11th grade, and I was now living with my cousin. And at this point, now it's like me, my sister, my brother, we're all back together. I'm in one room, my sister is sleeping in another room. Like clockwork, "Are you ready to go yet?" Usually I put like the covers over my face and I just like hide up under the cover until like daylight. But this time, like I couldn't take it. I just started like screaming and wailing and yelling. And then next thing I know, my cousin's husband like come into the room because it's like 6 o'clock in the morning and he is like cussing me out. So I finally tell him like, it's a girl that has been following me. She keep tapping me and she keep asking me like, am I ready to go? Like I am terrified. Of course, they didn't believe me. So a few minutes later, my sister comes into the room and she tells me like when she was like leaving out of her room, she was walking past the room that I was sleeping in and she heard me like screaming for my life and like it really terrified her. In the midst of that conversation, I just so happened to like feel a burning sensation on my foot. So when I looked down, like the skin on my big toe was like missing. Like it looked like somebody had like scraped it off. There was like nothing around the bed. Like at this point, there was not even a headboard for like me to even scratch my toe. So that really terrified me. So fast forward, I am now in college, in culinary school. I'm living with my best friend and our classmates. And we're just sitting around like sharing ghost stories. And then I proceed to tell them about the little girl that follows me. In the midst of that conversation, like something in our back pantry like fall and we go in there and it's the broom that has been sitting upright is like now on the floor. And one of my roommates like joke around and be like, "Ha ha, that's just Jessica." They named her Jessica. Later in that week, that same roommate came home that night. It told me that while she was driving, she just so happened to look up in her rear view and she saw a little girl sitting in her back seat. And that was the last time anybody ever physically saw Jessica. Now, fast forward to 2019, like I'm getting big in my spirituality and I get really close to a psychic. This psychic decides to give me a reading. And as we're talking, she asks me out of nowhere, like, who is the little girl? Me thinking she's talking about my daughter, I started talking about my daughter and she was like, "No, not her. There's another little girl." So then I proceed to tell her about the little girl that used to follow me. And then out of nowhere, she stopped me and was like, "Yeah, that used to be your guardian angel, but she doesn't like you anymore. And the reason why she don't like you is because a while ago, you allowed your friends to make fun of her and named her, and that wasn't her name. And she didn't like it." Still to this day, I wonder who that little girl was and what she would have done if I would have told her yes to her question of, was I ready to go yet? And I'm sorry for calling you Jessica. If you like that story, I have plenty more. Astral projections, that man. Oh, and the time where I once worked at a famous haunted resort and I let their co-workers talk me into going to a slave church. Don't get used to this content though.